Our first story today is titled "A Manager Told Me Not to Do Part of My Job, So I Didn't." This was a few years ago when I worked in a 4-star hotel chain that would be very well known and was part of a larger company that had hotels of varying status. I was about 24. There were a few of us who worked primarily in room service, and the breakfast shift was always a solo shift. One morning I started, and as was customary I started doing my prep, folding napkins, setting up 5/6 trays with pastries etc. per the pre-ordered breakfast cards, so I would only need to grab the correct tea/coffee and hot food later, as well as a few extra all-purpose trays for the people who call for room service last minute. I just get finished with this when the duty manager, I can't remember his full name but nickname was Prem, bursts into the kitchen with a dirty plate in his hand and sees me in my area while putting it in the pile of dishes for the kitchen porter. He tells across the kitchen, "What are you doing? It's so crazy out there that I have to help clear tables and you are back here. Get out and help." I replied that I had not gone up and walked the halls to collect the trays left out overnight yet, and he yelled some more and repeated that if he, a manager, is clearing tables, I better help regardless of if my job is actually in a different area. For the record, Prem was a menace. I witnessed him yell in college girls' faces until they cried several times. He would also routinely pick on anyone that was minimum wage floor staff. So I walk into the restaurant and the supervisor, Jen, is at the door and sees me walk in. She covers for room service and has worked it in the past, so she knows I should be collecting trays now so that the place doesn't look like a war zone upstairs. She asks if I've done this and I say no, Prem sent me in to help because it's so busy. She says it's not very busy at all. They don't need me and I should go upstairs and collect the dirty trays. I walk back into the kitchen and Prem is still standing there. "What are you doing? I told you to go in and help." I went in and Jen said they don't need me and told me to collect the trays. He then accuses me of going to her and asking can I go collect trays to get out of helping, so I tell him he can in and ask her if she called me or if I approached her. This satisfies him that I'm at least not lying, but he's still not happy. He says I'm the duty manager. Manager. Jen is a supervisor. I'm higher up, so you do what I tell you. Go in there and help clear tables. I don't want to see you going up to collect trays. I go back into the restaurant and Jen looks at me confused. I tell her that Prem insists that I help and won't let me go upstairs and says he outranks her, so she says I should join the guys at Station 1 and help their area. Breakfast passes and I pop out a few times to do my room services and come back with not much issue. My shift is until 3 p.m. and breakfast ended at 10:30 a.m. At this point nobody has been upstairs and housekeeping will have been putting out dirty trays. I get a call on the room service mobile from a housekeeping manager saying that floor 4 has a dozen or so trays in the hall. I'm sorry, the duty manager has prioritized other areas at the moment and has said I cannot go up. I start doing my afternoon prep, polishing cutlery and the like. About 12 p.m. I get another call, this time from the housekeeping's top manager. She tells me there is trays everywhere and I politely apologize and explain that my duty manager has used the exact words, "I don't want to see you going up to collect trays." She accepts this without question and asks that I help when I can. At 2 p.m. I get a call from the hotel's director of operations regarding the trays. At this point there are trays in the hallways on all 7 floors and the place looks filthy. Again, I politely explain what instructions I've received from Prem and this is accepted without further question and he says he will inquire into it. 3 p.m. arrives and I have not heard anything else, nor have I cleaned up the pigsty upstairs. My replacement arrives and I tell him what happened and apologize for the fact that he will have to collect these but tell him why. He laughs and decides to leave it until somebody else calls and informs him they are there. Shortly after this, Prem left the company. Please like and subscribe or she won't return my Amazon delivery. This one is titled, You can't pick up extra time because you had too many sick days. I'm a nurse at a large hospital. The floor I worked on was selected to be the COVID unit during the first and second waves. More nurses than not were catching COVID. So whenever I got an inkling of being sick, I would call out and get tested. Now if I tested positive, then I would get 2 weeks off without penalty. But I tested negative and returned to work. I get called into the office and got a verbal warning because I had one too many sick days. I said to my manager, you realize we are in a pandemic, right? She says yes, I know that, but we still have to stick to the original policy. When we clock in, there is an electronic message that pops up on the time clock that reads, during the pandemic we need to self-monitor ourselves, and by clocking in you are declaring that you are fit to work. There was no adjustment to the policy even though we were a COVID unit during a pandemic. So I would either have to lie about feeling sick when I clock in, or call out and get in trouble. Here is where the malicious compliance comes in. I had always picked up a lot of extra time in a sister department. Not because I needed the extra money, but because the hospital was always short-staffed. My manager didn't like the fact that I picked up extra time the other department. She wanted me to pick up extra time in our department. So she said, as punishment you cannot pick up extra time in the other department for 90 days. The length of my disciplinary period. You should be responsible enough to pick up extra time in your own department. As I didn't need the extra money, I didn't pick up any extra time in that period. I got called almost every day to ask if I could come in because they were short-staffed. One of the reasons they were short-staffed was because our sister unit was even more short-staffed and the nurses on my unit were getting pulled to go work there. If only more nurses picked up extra time on the other unit, home. At the end of the 90 days I was told I could pick up extra time in the sister department again. At which point I handed in my 2 weeks notice and told her I accepted a position at another hospital. She then tells me that because of my years of service I need to give 4 weeks notice. I tell her no, that's just a courtesy. So I'll extend the same courtesy I got when I needed to call out sick. If your manager isn't willing to help you when you need it, why should you help them? Besides, I definitely don't want my nurse to be sick. This next one is called, New HR Manager Annoys Hardworking Employees. Mass Malicious Compliance. Years ago I worked for an awesome company that understood workplace culture and fun was a huge part in keeping employees happy and productive. In our office, people would often cycle to work and therefore needed to shower and get ready at work. That meant that sometimes they didn't get to their desk until after 9 a.m. However, nearly everyone worked back without being asked to deliver on deadlines. Management didn't care because they knew the work was being done and everyone always went over and above. Enter new HR manager. We had never really had one before but were growing, so needed one. Within her first few weeks she sent out an email saying that everyone needed to be seated and ready to go at 9 a.m. and that we needed to stop having social chats and getting ready at work, or if we did, do it earlier. She never acknowledged the fact that everyone put in unpaid overtime. Cue mass malicious compliance. Everyone would start at 9 a.m. as per email and then leave at 5 p.m. Projects started running behind and clients started getting annoyed because their product was not being delivered on time. New HR manager was confused as to why work was not being delivered on time anymore. People were starting on time. She made sure of it. Needless to say, upper management removed the rule and she quit shortly after. We all went back to our normal ways and would you know it, projects were back on track. Don't walk into a new company and try to change something that isn't broken. The people will revolt. Edit. This was my first post and I didn't think anyone would see it. I want to clarify that OT was never expected or forced upon us, but due to awesome management, cool projects and great perks we didn't mind when we did do it. Edit. I see a lot of people confused about why HR would be involved with such matters. In smaller companies in Australia, HR oversees a lot more than the usual. It depends on the company really, and this company was approx 50 people. Our last manager malicious compliance story for today is titled, Manager gives staff an option to leave, so I did. Years ago, I worked at Best Buy, BB, in the South. I took the job my first senior year of college, I think, it might have been my second. The job was actually pretty good. Co-workers were great, we didn't work off commission, so it wasn't cutthroat on the floor, and we were in an old Target, so we had a huge stock forward/backroom area, where I worked, instead of putting things on shelves on the main floor, as most BBS did forward/do. I really enjoyed the job. It was okay pay for a college kid, and I worked mostly evenings as we'd restock when the store was closed. I even got a taste of Black Friday from the other side and our managers were pretty cool about it. Bought us breakfast that day and just made sure we knew where to be during our shift, and to sell the hell out of batteries. But since I worked in the back, I most did inventory unless a customer bought something big and needed help loading it, or it needed to be brought from the back to the front. So even Black Friday was pretty laid back for me. Easy job for a kid who only took it cause he ran out of the extra money he took out as part of a student loan. Side note, kids, don't do this, don't screw around with student loans. Also, please don't forbear loans. It's better to work 3 jobs than do that. I turned 50k of debt into 100k over a 2-year period of forbearing because I couldn't find a job. On to the MC. Nearing the holiday forward/Christmas season, we had a pretty bad snowstorm, which for the south is any snowstorm, but this dropped around 18. Though I drove a Dodge Neon, I made it in without issue as I had lived in a northern state for several years and was comfortable with driving in the snow. Because of this, we were grossly understaffed, and our truck was late by a day or two and it threw off everything. This meant we were low on stocked items on quite a few areas of the store. This was back in the heyday of CDs and DVDs, before iPhones existed, and when HD TVs were stupid expensive. As a result, management decided to have the whole team come help unload and stock shelves when the truck arrived. This was after closing at 10 p.m. Of course people bitched about it the whole time. The store manager, finally having had enough of us kids, got on the par and said, if anyone would like to leave, now is your chance. I'm locking up until we're done with the truck. Which basically meant, stop whining or you can leave and not come back, but in a more subtle way. At this point, it was about 11:30 p.m. and the truck would easily take until 1 a.m. or later to fully finish unloading and stocking the shelves. So I did what apparently no one else thought was wise. I told my co-workers I was out and walked to the front. The manager looked at me like I was crazy and I said, I've got finals coming up, and I don't plan on working for BB my whole life, and I walked out the door. I'm not sure if it was due to how taken aback he was, that he wasn't paid enough to care, or that he found my honesty refreshing, but I surprisingly wasn't fired. I did not study that night, but slept well and probably skipped my 8 a.m. class the next day. I ended up quitting a few weeks later when the semester ended because my loan was coming through, so I didn't need to work. Did I mention I was a massive idiot? Thank you guys so much for listening until the end. My name is a tall cat and these have been stories for r/malicious compliance. Please remember to like and subscribe because I get a head scratch every time you do. Time for a nap.